Disclaimer, I am not sponsored by anyone, especially not anyone I talk about in this video. I used Spotify for many years, and for 3 of those, I was a paying subscriber. So I've put hundreds of dollars into Spotify, but earlier this year in March, I quit. I canceled my subscription, and I didn't go to a different streaming service. And I now enjoy the music I love more. So let's talk about that. Spotify has been criticized over the years for a lot of things, most notably, of course, not paying musicians anything and kind of killing the record industry. But recently, Spotify has also complied with dystopian censorship laws in the UK, and most notably, the CEO of Spotify, Daniel Ek, invested 600 million euros into an AI military drone company in June. Now, this is actually not the first time that Daniel Ek has invested in Helsing. He is actually on the board and has been since 2021 when the company was founded, and he invested 100 million euros at that time. But the number is bigger this time, and people are more jaded by Spotify in 2025 than they were in 2021, so a lot of people have reacted to this. Now, in Helsing's case in particular, you might actually be okay with them, because they're currently, as far as we know, of course, they're a weapons manufacturer, we don't really know everything they do, but as far as we know, they are sending Ukraine a bunch of these drones. So maybe they're supplying the good guys at the moment. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Daniel Ek, the billionaire, is in this for the profit. Even if Helsing is, for now, supplying the good guys, I wouldn't blame you if you felt a little uncomfortable with your Spotify subscription being invested into the military-industrial complex. Of course, this isn't the reason I canceled my own subscription. I did that months before this recent investment. No, for me, the straw that broke the camel's back was actually a rumor about an AI remixing feature that would be introduced in a future ultra-premium tier, which, by the way, the idea that it's premium to just not have advertisements is so ridiculous. Anyway, it just made me reflect, and it made me say, do I really want to be paying for this service? I don't like this. I'm out. And of course, this is on top of a bunch of other reasons over time. It's a accumulation of lots of problems I had with Spotify and that many other people have with Spotify. But Spotify is not uniquely evil. The other biggest players in music streaming are Apple, Amazon, and Google, none of which are exactly beacons of morality. Apple Music is the second biggest music streaming service after Spotify, and Apple as a company is involved in the plights of Palestinians, of Uyghurs, of Congolese people, and who knows how many others. Amazon and Google are both part of Project Nimbus, which is a billion-dollar cloud computing deal with the IDF. Yes, the same IDF that is currently committing genocide in Gaza. It's honestly hard to say whether these other tech giants' music streaming services specifically are worse or better than Spotify's, because your subscription is a smaller portion of their revenue, but they also do more evil in the world. Now, maybe Tidal or Deezer or Qobuz or some other smaller player in streaming is better, but even if none of these services came with war crimes attached, the streaming model still sucks for musicians. It will never not suck. And honestly, it's not that great for listeners either. So better than ditching Spotify or Apple Music specifically is ditching streaming altogether. There have been many different types of media over the years for music. You had vinyl records, you have CDs, you have cassettes, you had, wax rolls way back in the day, and nowadays you have digital files, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Vinyl records are cool and nostalgic, and I love having this. This is one of my favorite albums right here, Led by Ancient Light, and it's so cool. I have the vinyl, and the art is huge and in my face, and it's lovely. But, vinyl records are toxic, they don't biodegrade, they also do degrade in audio quality over time, and they can break, and they cost money to distribute and ship. Digital audio files, on the other hand, are super high quality, they're basically free to copy and distribute, they basically take up no space because you can put thousands of them on a micro SD card, and you can play them in your car from your phone. So we'll be focusing on digital files, if for none of that, just because it's really the only way that you can actually buy most music. So, let's talk about the benefits of owning your music.
Quality.
You will never be able to listen to music in higher quality than with a lossless digital file. Straight up.
Editing.
This one's a little niche, but I really enjoy this. When you have the digital files, you can edit them. So that means you can make extended versions of songs, you can loop them, you can take two songs that you want to have together in a playlist when you shuffle play. This is something I always wanted from streaming services that none of them offer, because it's kind of niche, but sometimes you have two songs that are part of an album and they flow seamlessly from one to the other, and you want the pair of them as an item in a shuffled playlist. But of course you can't really do that, but when you have the files, you can just, and then boom.
More money to artists.
Spotify, from what I can find, takes 30 to 50% of the cut, but Bandcamp, for instance, only takes 15%, and then there are Bandcamp Fridays every now and then where they take 0%. Artists also sometimes sell their music on their own shops, on their websites and stuff like that, and then they probably have even more control.
Ownership.
Music library? More like music library. Okay. Streaming services have this feature that they call a library. You know, your Spotify library, your music library on Apple Music. And this is basically just a lie. You are not building up a music library, you are just bookmarking stuff. And just like you don't own any of the websites that you bookmark in your browser, you don't own anything in your music library. Other parties get to decide at any point whether stuff actually stays in that library or not. Spotify can remove stuff, if they were, for instance, complying with dystopian censorship laws from our government, which they would never do, I'm sure. Oh wait. Or simply speaking, the artist could just take their stuff off and then you no longer have that. So what are you going to do here? Are you going to keep paying this subscription to Spotify for the rest of your life? Are you going to end up paying many thousands of dollars to Spotify to own nothing? I paid for Spotify for years, and I guess that was my plan. I didn't think about it that much, I guess. At first, it feels great. You're you pay this little bit of money and you have access to everything. But if you think about it in the long term, it doesn't make as much sense. There is a fundamental difference here between this kind of subscription service and a real subscription service, like say the original subscription service, the Milkman.
So this takes us all the way back to the Milkman subscription from the 1860s. The Milkman subscription was convenient. You didn't have to go to the store, you didn't have to buy a cow, you didn't have to then milk the cow, and it was a perishable product that you drank every single day because it made your bones big or whatever big milk was propagating at the time. So I think that most of us can agree that it makes sense to subscribe to a service that provides something that you need on a daily basis and that is perishable or can be depleted.
Ben a Minute's video about how subscription services are terrible is one of many such videos on the platform, but unfortunately I find that most of these videos are very defeatist.
We don't really have another choice. I mean, going back to the music streaming services, we only have Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. I know there's other players in the industry like Tidal, Amazon Music, but those are the three main big ones. So unless you buy your own CDs, cassettes, or vinyls, then there is no other way to access that form of media. You only have the choice to subscribe.
The thing that Ben a Minute and a lot of other people forget here is that for music specifically at least, there are other options. You don't have to use one of the big streaming services. You can buy music. It's available. Digital downloads are out there. The thing is that fundamentally what most of us want to do is to build up a library full of the music that we love over time. Spotify and Apple Music and other streaming services pretend that they offer you that ability, but they don't. Owning your media in a world full of predatory subscription services that seek to wring you dry with invisible automatic payments that don't feel real because they're in the background and it's all digital and it all happens automatically and they just hope that you forget about it and keep paying them money forever. It feels good to get out of that, even in small part. You own the files. They cannot be taken away from you. You do not depend on some company to keep their servers up forever, and you are actually building up a music library. On this point in particular, I'll leave you with this question. If you continue paying Spotify's $12 a month for the rest of your life and you're in the age range of most of my viewers, you will end up paying Spotify on the order of $10,000 by the time you die. That's about 1,000 albums worth if you had bought them. So what you have to ask yourself, and this is not taking into account inflation or gentrification, which would make this point even stronger, what you have to ask yourself is, if I were to buy music, would I really want to or need to buy significantly more than 1,000 albums in my life? And if the answer to that question is no, then Spotify isn't even cheaper than owning. So it seems then that the only real downside to owning music is
inconvenience.
Hang on a sec. That's not a benefit. Inconvenience? Inconvenience is terrible. Inconvenience is the worst. At least that's how a lot of us have been conditioned to think. Ultimately, if you are looking for the most convenient possible option to consume music, streaming services can't be beat. But convenience is not inherently good, nor is it inherently bad, but the absolute sanctity that so many of us in the West put on convenience is absolutely terrible. There are a lot of essays on this website already about how convenience is killing us, and you can go watch them, and that's fine and great. I don't love the phrase because us, as in like in the West, like the ones who are, ordering DoorDash for everything, it's not killing us. It's not good for us, but it's not killing us. But our hyper-consumerist capitalist society is absolutely killing people in the global South, in Africa, in South America, in South Asia, in the Middle East, etc. But yeah, I mean, hyper-consumerism is not great for us either. To be perhaps overly blunt, streaming turns music from art into content. There's a recommendation algorithm that gives you your Discover Weekly, or now I think they have like an AI DJ or some bullshit. And it's completely trivial to skip a song, to skip around an artist's discography, pull up any song ever at any time, at any point. There's no commitment to anything. Now, to be fair, I don't think that any of that is inherently bad necessarily, but I do think that for the majority of people, we will actually benefit from a more intentional listening experience. You can certainly be intentional when you listen to music through a streaming service, of course. But in a way, it's kind of easier to be more intentional the less convenient the medium is. This will all be on kind of a sliding scale depending on the medium. So the less convenient the medium, the more momentous and meaningful any particular listening of your favorite music is going to be. So you can imagine like pre-radio and pre-recorded music, hearing your favorite piece in concert, played by an orchestra, must have been the most incredible thing. Orchestra concerts are already incredible even today, but back then, it's like that was your only chance to hear this thing. It just must be so amazing. Then, somewhere in the middle of this spectrum, I guess you have vinyl and radio. Vinyl and radio are inconvenient and convenient in different ways. Vinyl, of course, you have to be very intentional with your place. You can't just listen to a vinyl record in a moving vehicle, but you also, of course, have to pick a particular record. You have to be active in turning it over if it has another side to it. You can't just skip around within the album because this is not how vinyls work. With radio, of course, you don't have to do much to keep the music going, but if your favorite song comes on the radio, that's the coolest ever. Then maybe a bit more convenient would be CDs, which you can play in cars and you can skip songs on, and then more convenient than that is digital files, and then more convenient than that is streaming. For most people today, and certainly for myself, I think that digital files are actually the best balance of this. But, digital files are pretty far to one end of this spectrum. When I play my favorite song, it's not nearly as momentous as if that song came on the radio or if I saw it live. But I do think that just owning the music in whatever medium does fundamentally make the listening experience more intentional. Now, when I canceled my subscription earlier this year, I had about 1,000 tracks and about 100 albums saved. And I know that that's actually on the lower end. I have friends with 5, 10x of that. And it can seem really daunting, right? You're looking at these 500 albums and you're like, I'm gonna have to buy all of these? But of course, you don't have to do that. First of all, because you don't have to do it all at once, right? Those 500 albums, you don't need all of them day one, or week one, or even month one, or even year one, if we're being honest. I am very confident that if you look through your quote-unquote library, you will find that a lot of that stuff you don't actually care about that deeply. Streaming services make it completely effortless and potentially thoughtless to like a track, to add it to a playlist, to add an album to your library, right? You just click a button. No time, no money, it's the simplest, most convenient possible mechanism. Now, I am not advocating for us to go back to the 90s or something like that. The beauty of living in the internet age is that you can listen to anything basically whenever you want, even without a subscription service. You can vet an album on Bandcamp before you buy it. You can play through the entire thing. And you know what? You can pull up Spotify with AdBlock, or you can pull up YouTube and listen to whatever it is that you want to listen at any point in time. There's a bunch of songs that I had saved on Spotify, but I can just pull them up whenever I want if I really want to listen to them. The thing is that they're just not that important to me, so I'm not going to go out of my way and buy them. They're still accessible. We still have the internet. It's still all there. One of the things that I've really enjoyed in this process of building up my digital library is rediscovering albums that I saved and liked a long time ago but haven't listened to in a while. There's this album called Loopified by Dirty Loops, and I bought it recently, and man, it's so good. And having the files, this is not a very concrete point, but having the files for music that is truly incredible and amazing that you just love so much, it feels so good. It feels so good to own those digital files in lossless quality. It's so good. I promise it'll feel great. We in the modern day have the luxury, the convenience even, of listening to an entire album all the way through before deciding whether to buy it or not. We have it better than music fans in past decades, and we can take advantage of that while also owning the music that is most important to us. Now, the biggest drawback of buying music is, of course, the buying part, where you need to buy a bunch of stuff and spend a bunch of money, and it's like, I don't have a bunch of money, what am I supposed to do? Well, here's the deal. For one, like I said, over the course of your whole life, it's probably not more expensive to buy music. But in the short term, yeah, I get it. You know, even though you probably don't care about everything in your Spotify library really deeply, it's totally possible that you care about 50 different albums really, really deeply and that you want access to all of them immediately. Okay, well, here's the thing. When I was doing research earlier this year, when I was trying to make my decision about what to do since I had decided to quit Spotify, I came across this interesting little comment from somebody. I couldn't find it again for this video. I think it was a Reddit comment. But anyway, this guy had an interesting approach to this. What he did was he pirated like all the music that he wanted to have in his library, but once a month he would buy one of those albums. So he was spending about the same amount of money as a Spotify subscription, and more of that money was going to artists, because when you buy the album, typically, especially if it's through Bandcamp, you know, more of that money proportionally goes to the artists. So he's spending the same amount of money over time, and more money is going to artists, and he gets to have his whole library because he pirated the stuff to make up for it. Kind of interesting. Not saying you should do that. In fact, you definitely should not do that, of course, because piracy is illegal. Bad. Illegal. So don't do it. But you know, it's possible, but don't do it. So, if I have convinced you to look into owning your music, let me quickly point out some great resources. I personally use MusicBee as a music player for my PC and Auto Music on my phone. MusicBee is the only one I ever tried on desktop because I liked it and didn't feel the need to try anything else, but there are a ton of free and open source music players out there. On my phone, I tried several different apps, but Auto Music ended up being my favorite. It's free by default and there are no ads, but then you can also pay, I think, $6 or $7 to get, you know, the rest of the features, but it's nothing essential, and I mostly just paid to support the developer. The other big player in apps, I think, is PowerAmp, and PowerAmp is pretty cool. It has a lot of cool features, and it has a kind of slick UI, but it just didn't gel with me as much as Auto Music, which is a bit simpler, a bit more minimal. Now, for buying music, for actually getting those files that you will then play with those apps, I have a fairly standardized procedure at this point. I didn't plan a procedure, but it just happens to work out this way. First, I look on Bandcamp. That's where I go first. I like Bandcamp a lot. It's cute. Like, artists have their own pages that they can customize, and they can set their own prices, and a huge portion of the money goes to artists, and Bandcamp Fridays exist where 100% of the revenue goes to artists. Bandcamp is cool and fun, and I like it. That's my first option, usually. If it's not on Bandcamp, then I'll look on the artist's website. And if it's not on the artist's website, if they don't have like their own store selling it, then I go to a big music store. The one I've been looking at mostly is Qobuz, which is, you know, it's kind of like Amazon Music or one of those Tidal, whatever it is. Lesser known in the States at least, but yeah, Qobuz is just preferable over, you know, Amazon for obvious reasons. And with that procedure, I have been able to find every single album that I've looked for. Ultimately, the point is this: you will not be less happy, especially in the long term, with your relationship with the music that you love and your listening experience of that music, if you switch from streaming to owning. If you're on a road trip someday and you're on the aux with your library and then somebody asks to play a song that's not in your library, you know what? That's actually fine. Life can be good without that hyperconvenience, and also, honestly, you can probably just pull it up on YouTube anyway. If you have to depend on the people in your life and the collaborators of your favorite artists that you already know in order to find new music, you know what? That's actually fine. You actually don't need a Discover Weekly playlist or an AI DJ to be happy in your life. Owning the files means that you have control over your actual music library, and it's a beautiful thing that I hope you'll join me and millions of others in doing.